Vampires, Reptilians, and Power, David Icke's Anunnaki as a Cultural Metaphor. David Icke frames the Anunnaki as reptilian, fourth-dimensional beings who occupy or overshadow human bodies, crossbreed with select bloodlines, drink human blood, and feed on fear and sexual energy. He maps these traits onto classical vampire motifs, eternal life, blood drinking, shape-shifting, and secret societies, and locates the phenomenon inside networks of elite institutions and ritual practice. Icke's account hinges on a set of core claims and symbolic correspondences. He presents possession and transference as central. Reptilian consciousnesses move house between bodies, a claim that mirrors vampire folklore about a persistent, transgressive life that evades death. Blood and energy feeding are also pivotal in his schema. The Anunnaki's alleged need for blood and substances, like adrenochrome, parallels vampire blood drinking and the folkloric linking of life force to bodily fluids. Shapeshifting and hybridity appear in the reptilian left-right arrow human metamorphosis Icke describes, functioning like vampire transformations, bat, mist, and supporting his emphasis on hidden elites produced by selective interbreeding. Sex, ritual, and power are woven into the narrative as well. Icke ties sexual violence, orgasmic energy harvesting, and satanic ritual to Anunnaki feeding and social control, reframing erotic vampirism as institutionalized exploitation. Finally, in his conspiratorial institutional web, secret societies and global organizations become the modern crypts and covens that conceal and perpetuate the Anunnaki/Draco lineages, linking myth to geopolitics in his architecture. There are analytic and cultural strengths to Icke's approach. His symbolic synthesis, weaving together ancient mythic figures like the Anunnaki, vampire lore, and contemporary conspiracy motifs, creates a resonant metaphor that illuminates anxieties about elites, immortality, and bodily integrity. The reptilian/vampire frame taps long-standing tropes of predation, contamination, and secret lineages, giving complex social critiques an accessible, emotionally compelling form for receptive audiences. However, the approach has substantial methodological and evidential weaknesses. Textual and historical overreach is a recurring problem. Icke often conflates modern interpretations and fringe readings with Mesopotamian texts without demonstrating philological or archaeological support, reinterpreting primary sources to fit the hypothesis rather than testing the hypothesis against the sources. Empirical evidence for claims about bodily possession, genetic breeding programs, and hormonal harvesting is lacking. These assertions are presented as fact despite an absence of verifiable data, falsifiable mechanisms, or credible eyewitness substantiation, leaving the argument dependent on anecdote, interpretive leaps, and selective sourcing. Syncretism without provenance further weakens the account. Ritual practices and mythic substances such as soma or ambrosia are analogically linked to reptilian blood drinking rather than shown to have demonstrable historical continuity, producing speculative associations that read modern meanings back into ancient symbols. Aggregating disparate institutions and historical actors into a single monolithic cabal collapses complexity into unified intent, an analytically risky move that often renders the theory unfalsifiable. The political and social implications of this framing are mixed. As metaphor, the vampire/Anunnaki construct can mobilize fear and moral panic about elites and secrecy, potentially animating political dissent or social mistrust depending on context. At the same time, reading elites as literally vampiric or reptilian risks scapegoating and demonization. Such dehumanizing metaphors can justify conspiratorial suspicion, moral panic, and the stigmatization of real groups, so careful critique must separate metaphorical indictment from literal accusation. Scholarly placement treats Icke as part of a modern reptoid conspiracy tradition that blends utopian and dystopian motifs, folklore, and political critique. Academics generally regard this material as culturally revealing rather than empirically substantiated history. Cultural critics note that the vampire motif can function as a structure of dissent, making visible anxieties about power. But they also warn that these narratives can obscure concrete political analysis by substituting symbolic enemies for traceable mechanisms of power. Overall, Icke's Anunnaki vampire construct operates as a powerful cultural metaphor that repurposes vampire tropes to dramatize anxieties about immortality, elite power, and bodily sovereignty. It is rhetorically rich and illuminating about contemporary fears, but methodologically speculative, evidentially thin, and prone to conflating metaphor with historical or scientific fact.